Hello, this is Professor James Strickler, and this is a course in American government. This lesson is from Unit 6 about interest groups and political parties. It's Lesson 12 about types of political parties. In this lesson, you'll learn about major parties, minor parties, and third parties. In previous lessons, we've learned about interest groups. Let me begin by explaining how political parties are similar to interest groups. Interest groups have formal organizations. They have common interests among the people who are members of those formal organizations. And they press government to do things for them. Political parties are similar in all these ways. But as we learned in the last lesson, political parties do one additional important thing that makes them political parties. And that is that they run candidates for office. They try to get their own people elected to then seize the mechanisms of government, to thereby get government to do what they want the government to do. Now, there are three types of parties that try to do this. They're what we categorize as major parties, minor parties, and third parties. We're going to address each of these types separately, and I've color-coded the slides so that you can keep track of which we're talking about. First, we'll begin with some sort of reddish-pink colored slides talking about major parties. Major parties in the United States of America are just two. They are the Republican Party, here represented by the symbol of the elephant, and the Democratic Party, here represented by the symbol of a donkey. Well, what makes these parties major parties? There are three aspects of political parties that, if they're true, we will then define the political party as major. The first of those is that the party must be large. And what we mean by large is that it's big enough that usually in just about any election, it stands a chance of winning. It always has close to a majority wherever it's competing. The only two political parties in America currently that fit that definition are the Republicans and the Democrats. Secondly, a major political party is persistent. Now, what is meant by that is that it sticks around from one election to another. It doesn't just show up and then disappear. It's going to be around continually. And as it sticks around continually, it's going to continue to be large, competitive, always having a chance to win. And the third feature of a major political party is that it's moderate. Now, that may seem a little bit untrue to you, perhaps based on your own experience if you pay a lot of attention to politics. If you happen to be a person whose personal ideology favors that of the Democratic Party, you may look over at the Republicans and think that they're rather extreme, and vice versa. If you find yourself more sympathetic to the Republican side of things, you may look at the Democrats and think they're rather extreme. People tend to not look at themselves and think that they're extreme, but they'll look at their opponents and think that. But if you look at the two major American political parties in comparison to other political parties around the world, you'll see how they both reside near the middle of the ideological spectrum. While Republicans may love to accuse Democrats of being communists, no, they're not really. Communists are much more extreme. While Democrats may like to accuse Republicans of being fascists or Nazis, they're clearly not. They're much more extreme. So the two major American political parties, when viewed from a context of other countries in the world with other political parties, both appear to be fairly moderate. And there's an obvious reason for that. Remember, they're big. They think they can win every election. They're trying to win every election, which means that they need to capture the middle of the electorate. They need to appeal to those moderate voters, at least somewhat, to get a few of those votes in order to be able to win. And this causes both political parties, both major political parties in America, to move toward the political center. They're so close to the center that many of their policies are actually quite similar to each other when viewed from a broader perspective. Now, they make a big deal about small differences, but to a great extent, they are actually quite similar to each other when compared to other more extreme parties that exist around the world. So, at least in America, major political parties are large, they're persistent, and they're fairly moderate. The next category of parties are minor parties. Here on the slide, I've got four examples for you. The one on the right was sort of the gold eagle, is the Libertarian Party. In the center, we have the Constitution Party. To the left, we have the Communist Party of the United States. And at the bottom, we have the Green Party. Now, we don't need to go into any detail about what each of these parties believes in. It's just important to note that these parties are around on the ballot, and you may well see them when you have a chance to go to vote. You may, when you go to vote for president, see someone not just affiliated with the Republicans or Democrats listed on the ballot, but you'll see candidates affiliated with parties like these also. So what makes these political parties minor parties? The first thing is they're small. They don't really have a chance of winning most elections. Yeah, there are rare cases around the country where a libertarian or even a communist may get elected to some smaller office. But competing for the big offices in government, they generally don't stand a chance. Yet, despite not standing a chance, being so small, having so few people supporting them, getting so few votes, they are persistent. Well, this is kind of a paradox. Why would they stick around election after election after election when they're not getting very many votes? At the best, the Libertarian Party, which is the largest of these minor parties, may get 3, 4, 5% of the vote in a given election. That's about as good as these minor parties usually do. So again, why stick around election after election and keep competing when they just keep losing and losing badly? The reason is because they are ideologically committed. For example, the Communist Party. If you're a communist, you cannot possibly see yourself voting for the Republican Party, for instance. So if you're really committed to being a communist, you're going to continue to vote for the Communist Party, even if they lose every time. If you're a libertarian, you believe in certain values and ideals that don't fit the two major political parties. So you're going to continue to vote libertarian. Now, I'm not going to test you on this, but just to show what kind of thing libertarians believe in. On one hand, they believe in small government, which is a lot like Republicans, but they also believe in legalizing a lot of non-traditional things, like, for example, being very hands-off about abortion and taking recreational drugs and things like that. So they don't agree with the traditional standpoints of Republicans, but they do agree with their idea of free markets. And then with comparison with Democrats, they do believe in their acceptance of alternative lifestyles, but they don't agree with the Democrats' idea of big government being involved with economic issues. So you've got this Republican Party that's staked out a position, not entirely like either of the major political parties, and they just get a smaller part of the vote every election. But there are certain people in the country that completely agree with that libertarian point of view, and they will vote for the libertarians every time, win or lose. The next kind of political party we have are what we call third parties. And there's two big examples in American presidential history. In 1912, Teddy Roosevelt was running for president. The problem was he had retired from the presidency 4 years before. He'd already served 2 terms as president. According to the tradition of George Washington, he shouldn't run for president again. So he retired, but then 4 years later, he had the itch to run again. The problem was his former political party, the Republicans, were going to nominate the sitting president at the time, William Howard Taft. So Roosevelt, who's going to run for president, needed to start his own political party, which he did. It became known as the Bull Moose Party. Its official name was the Progressive Party, but people called it the Bull Moose Party. And Teddy Roosevelt, as the nominee of the Bull Moose Party, actually defeated Taft in the election. Problem was they split the vote and Woodrow Wilson got elected president instead, the Democrat. But Teddy Roosevelt was very successful as this third-party candidate, receiving about 27% of the vote. In 1992, another presidential candidate slipped in as a third party and made some noise in the election, and that was Ross Perot, a businessman from Texas. He received 19% of the vote that time around. put him in third place, but it took a big chunk of the vote away from the two front runners, Bill Clinton, who was elected president, and George H.W. Bush, the sitting president, who lost to Bill Clinton. So we have these two examples in American history where these candidates who were not members of either of the two major political parties got a big chunk of the presidential vote. These kind of candidates are called by political scientists third-party candidates. Now, to more carefully describe what it means to be a third party, we're going to look at three elements like we did with major and minor parties. Third parties, first of all, are large. They actually stand a chance of winning, as in the example of Ross Perot and the example of Teddy Roosevelt. Many people thought going into the election that Teddy Roosevelt would actually win, although it ended up being Woodrow Wilson. In Ross Perot's case, by the time election rolled around, we knew he wasn't going to win, but earlier in the election season, he actually led in the polls ahead of both Clinton and Bush, though he ultimately lost. So third-party candidates are big. We think they actually could win. But their parties are also temporary. Now, this creates a different sort of paradox, and that is, if we have a big party that actually stands a chance of winning, why would it be temporary? Why not stick around and keep trying? The reason is that third parties are personality driven. What this means is they are built around a single person. The Bull Moose Party was built around Teddy Roosevelt. Built around Ross Perot was a new political party called the Reform Party. So these political parties were big for a short time when they had their prominent candidate that people kind of loved. And then once that person was gone, the political party essentially disappeared also. Now, just to get a little terminology straight here, people casually using these terms may refer to parties as third parties when they actually mean minor parties, as they're described by political scientists. So you may hear during an election somebody refer to the candidate of the Green Party, for example, as a third-party candidate, or the candidate of the Libertarian Party as a third-party candidate. At least the way the terms are used by political scientists, those are not accurate descriptions. Those are minor party candidates. A third-party candidate is a candidate of a party that's large, temporary, and built around a single person's personality. Now let's review what we learned in this lesson. What is a characteristic of a major party? Is it that it's temporary, or small, or personality-driven, or that it usually has a chance to win? A major party usually has a chance to win. What is a characteristic of a minor party? Is it temporary? Is it large? Is it persistent? Or does it have a cult of personality? A minor party is persistent. They're small, they always lose, but they stick around because people are committed to the ideas or the ideology of that party, win or lose. What is a characteristic of a third party? Is it temporary? Is it ideological? Is it permanent? Is it small? A third party is temporary. It'll be around for an election or two while that person that it's built around is running for office. But once that person stops running, the party disappears. That does it for this lesson. The next lesson is also from Unit 6. It's Lesson 12, and it's about the structure of political parties.